Everyone thinks this was a massive volcanic explosion, but the truth is far more dangerous. The mountain is collapsing from within. At Mayon Volcano, dramatic footage shows thick ash clouds rising, while glowing material rushes down the slopes at terrifying speed. At first glance, it looks like a classic explosive eruption from the summit. But something doesn't add up. There is no towering vertical blast column strong enough to explain what we're seeing. Instead, the movement begins along the flank of the volcano itself. A buildup of lava, slowly accumulating over time, has become unstable. Then suddenly, part of that structure gives way. The moment it collapses, trapped gases are released instantly, turning the falling debris into a fast-moving, superheated flow of ash rock and gas. This is not slow-moving lava. This is a dense, ground-hugging current capable of racing several kilometers in minutes, burning, suffocating, and destroying everything in its path. And the most unsettling part, it doesn't require a massive explosion to start. So how can a silent collapse generate this level of destruction? And what does this reveal about the true state of Mayon Volcano right now? Subscribe now to stay informed, because what you're seeing is only the surface of a much deeper and more dangerous process. What makes this event so misleading is that it looks exactly like a powerful eruption, but it isn't, at least not in the way most people assume. The main driver here is not a vertical blast from deep underground. Instead, it's a gravity-driven collapse along the volcano's flank. For weeks, Mayon has been slowly pushing lava outward. That steady buildup creates unstable layers, hot, fractured material sitting on a steep slope with very little structural support. At a certain point, gravity takes over. A section of the lava front becomes too heavy and too weak to hold together. When it collapses, the structure breaks apart instantly. Trapped gases are released, and the falling debris transforms into a dense, fast-moving current of ash rock and heat, what scientists call a pyroclastic density current. That's why this looks so dramatic. The danger isn't shooting upward into the sky, it's racing down the mountain, hugging the ground, and accelerating through natural channels. And here's the key shift in understanding. This kind of destruction doesn't require a massive explosion. It only needs instability that has been building quietly over time. If you're following this event and want real updates as it develops, comment 9 below to stay connected with the next critical information. What makes this situation more concerning is that it didn't happen suddenly. It has been building over time. For months, Mayon has been in a steady phase of lava fusion. Instead of explosive bursts, the volcano has been slowly pushing molten rock outward from the summit. At first, this kind of activity appears relatively controlled. But beneath that surface calm, a different process begins to take shape. As lava accumulates along the steep slopes, it doesn't form a solid, stable structure. It cools unevenly, fractures internally, and creates layers of weak, broken material. Over time, these layers stack on top of each other, increasing both weight and instability. Small cracks begin to form. Subtle shifts occur within the structure. And with each new surge of lava, pressure continues to build not just from below, but across the surface itself. This is where the real danger starts to develop. Because once the balance between support and gravity is lost, the system doesn't fail, gradually it collapses. And when it does, everything that has been building silently can release at once, turning a slow-moving process into a sudden, high-impact event. What we're seeing now may not be the beginning, but the result of a long, hidden buildup finally reaching its limit. To understand how significant this event is, we need to look at the scale and behavior of what actually occurred. Reports indicate that the flows generated during this episode traveled several kilometers down the slopes, making them among the longest and most extensive flows observed in the current eruption phase. That alone is a critical signal. In volcanic systems like Mayon, longer run-out distances often point to a larger volume of unstable material being released in a short period of time. Temperature is another key factor. These flows are not just hot, they can reach hundreds of degrees Celsius, carrying enough thermal energy to ignite vegetation, damage infrastructure, and make survival in their direct path nearly impossible. Combined with their density, these currents don't behave like typical lava flows. Instead, they move as fast, ground-hugging masses capable of overwhelming terrain rapidly. What's equally important is how these flows formed. Evidence suggests they were not driven by a powerful vertical explosion. Instead, they originated from the collapse of an advancing lava front, where built-up material suddenly lost stability. This distinction matters. Because it means the volcano does not need to escalate into a major explosive phase to produce highly destructive events. In fact, this type of activity can repeat. And that's what makes the current situation more serious than it may appear at first glance. The system has already demonstrated that it can generate large, fast-moving flows under existing conditions without a dramatic change in eruption style. Here's where the situation becomes even more counterintuitive. Many people assume that pyroclastic flows only form after a massive eruption column rises into the sky, and then collapses back down. That's one mechanism, but it's not the only one. In the case of Mayon, the evidence points to a different trigger. Collapse-driven flows originating directly from the volcano's flanks. When a lava front advances, it often builds a steep, unstable edge made of partially solidified rock. Beneath that crust, gases remain trapped and temperatures stay extremely high. If that front suddenly fails, the structure doesn't just break, it disintegrates. The trapped gases expand rapidly, reducing friction between particles and effectively fluidizing the debris. The result is a dense, fast-moving current that behaves less like a pile of falling rocks, and more like a ground hugging avalanche of hot ash and gas. It can accelerate quickly, follow existing drainage channels, and travel much farther than a simple landslide would. This is why today's event matters. It shows that even during a relatively steady eruption phase, Mayon can generate dangerous flows without any dramatic explosive signal. In other words, the absence of a towering eruption column does not mean the system is safe. It may simply be operating through a different, equally hazardous pathway. To understand why these flows can travel so far and move so fast, we need to look at what's happening at a microscopic level. Inside an advancing lava front, the outer layer begins to cool and solidify, forming a rough, unstable crust. But beneath that surface, temperatures remain extremely high, and volcanic gases stay trapped within the material. This creates a pressurized system made of hot fragments, ash, and gas constantly shifting under stress. When part of this structure collapses, that pressure is released almost instantly. As the material breaks apart, the trapped gases expand and push outward between particles. This process reduces friction dramatically and transforms what would normally be a simple rockfall into something very different, a fluidized flow. Instead of moving like solid debris, the mixture begins to behave more like a dense fluid, capable of spreading, accelerating, and maintaining momentum over long distances. At the same time, the high temperature of the flow heats the surrounding air, causing it to expand and create a cushion-like effect near the ground. This further reduces resistance, allowing the current to glide across the surface rather than grind to a stop. This combination gas expansion, its heat and particle interaction, is what gives pyroclastic flows their defining characteristics: speed, reach, and destructive power. And once that system is triggered, it becomes extremely difficult to stop. What elevates the risk even further is how unforgiving these flows become once they are in motion. Inside a pyroclastic current, temperatures can rise to hundreds of degrees Celsius, carrying enough heat to ignite vegetation instantly, and severely damage structures within seconds. But temperature is only part of the danger. These flows also move with significant momentum, driven by gravity and guided by the steep, symmetrical slopes of Mayon. As the current descends, it doesn't spread randomly. It is funneled through existing channels, gullies, and drainage paths carved by previous eruptions. This natural guidance system allows the flow to accelerate and maintain direction, concentrating its energy instead of dissipating it. That's why even flows that are not the fastest on record can still be extremely destructive. Their density, heat, and focused movement make them capable of overwhelming anything directly in their path. Another critical factor is timing. These events can develop with very little warning once instability reaches a tipping point. There is often no clear build-up moment visible to the public, just a sudden release. This means the real danger lies not only in the flow itself, but in how quickly it forms and how little time there is to react once it begins. For people living around Mayon, the experience is very different from what the footage alone suggests. Early in the day, many residents noticed ash beginning to fall light at first, then gradually more persistent. For those who have lived near the volcano for years, ashfall is not unusual. But this time felt different. The sky dimmed faster, and the source of the ash wasn't clearly visible from the summit. Some looked toward the volcano expecting to see a towering eruption column. Instead, what they saw was more confusing low, fast-moving clouds hugging the slopes, spreading outward rather than rising upward. From a distance, it didn't immediately signal a major eruption. Yet the scale of the movement suggested something serious was unfolding. This uncertainty creates a different kind of pressure. People aren't just reacting to what they see, they're trying to interpret it in real time. Is this a normal phase of activity, or the beginning of something more dangerous? That question carries weight, especially in communities that have experienced past eruptions. Even when evacuation zones are already in place, the psychological impact remains. The feeling that the mountain is still changing, still unstable, and still capable of sudden shifts keeps tension high. Because in situations like this, not knowing what comes next can be just as stressful as the event itself. To fully understand what's happening at Mayon, it helps to place this event within a broader geological pattern. Mayon is classified as a stratovolcano. It's built over centuries through repeated layers of lava ash and fragmented volcanic material. This type of volcano is known for producing both relatively steady lava flows and highly explosive eruptions. But what often goes unnoticed is the intermediate behavior-long periods of activity, where material slowly accumulates and gradually weakens the structure. Historically, Mayon has shown a pattern of progressive instability. Instead of shifting instantly into a major eruption, the system often evolves through stages: lava extrusion, surface buildup, structural weakening, and then partial collapses. These collapses can generate dangerous flows even without a dramatic explosive phase. That pattern appears to be repeating now. The current eruption has been ongoing for months, producing continuous lava movement and building unstable deposits along the slopes. Over time, these deposits become more prone to failure, especially on a steep, symmetrical cone like Mayon. This means today's event is not isolated. It fits into a longer cycle, one where accumulation leads to instability, and instability leads to collapse-driven hazards. The impact of this event extends well beyond the slopes of the volcano itself. Even when the main flows remain confined within established hazard zones, secondary effects begin to spread outward. Fine ash lifted from pyroclastic currents can travel with the wind, reaching nearby communities and affecting air quality. Inhaling these particles can irritate the respiratory system, especially for vulnerable groups, while visibility on roads can drop quickly, increasing the risk of accidents. Infrastructure is also affected in less obvious ways. Its ash settling on power lines and equipment can disrupt electricity, particularly when combined with moisture. Water systems may become contaminated as ash mixes with local supplies, and agriculture can suffer as crops are coated with fine volcanic material. These are not isolated issues, they create a domino effect. Transportation slows down, daily routines are interrupted. Local economies begin to feel pressure as normal activity becomes harder to maintain. And while these impacts may not appear as dramatic as the eruption footage, they can persist much longer and affect far more people. What we're seeing is a reminder that volcanic events operate on multiple levels. The visible hazard is only one part of the system. The broader consequences often unfold quietly, but with lasting effects. The most important takeaway from this event is not how dramatic it looks, but how it actually works. There's a common assumption that volcanic danger is directly tied to explosive power. Bigger eruption, bigger risk. But Mayon is showing a different reality. The system does not need to produce a massive vertical blast to become highly destructive. Instead, the real threat can come from long-term instability building quietly on the surface. What we're seeing is a shift in perspective. Risk is not only about pressure rising deep underground, it's also about how material accumulates, weakens, and eventually fails under its own weight. A slow, continuous eruption can gradually create the exact conditions needed for sudden, high-impact events. In that sense, the danger is not always obvious in the moment. It develops over time, often without dramatic warning signals. This changes how we interpret volcanic activity. It's a less explosive phase does not necessarily mean a safer one. It may simply mean the system is operating in a different mode, where collapse becomes the primary trigger. Understanding that difference is critical, because it means the absence of a major explosion should never be mistaken for stability. At this point, the key question is not just what happened, but how we interpret it. If most people saw the footage and assumed it was a massive explosive eruption, that reaction is understandable. The visuals are intense, and the scale feels overwhelming. But now that we know this event was largely driven by a structural collapse, it raises a deeper question about how volcanic danger is perceived. Is a towering explosion really the most dangerous scenario? Or is a slow building system, quietly becoming unstable over time, just as concerning if not more? Because in cases like this, the warning signs are less obvious. There's no single dramatic moment that signals a clear shift. Instead, the risk develops gradually, until one point of failure triggers everything at once. That's what makes events like Mayon so complex. What do you think is more dangerous? A sudden explosive eruption, or a hidden instability that can collapse without warning? Share your perspective below. What happens next at Mayon remains uncertain, and that uncertainty is part of the risk. There are several possible paths forward. The system could gradually stabilize, with lava output slowing and fewer collapses occurring over time. It could also continue in its current state, producing intermittent collapses that generate similar flows without a major shift in eruption style. Or, under certain conditions, internal pressure could build further and transition the volcano into a more explosive phase. Right now, there is no single indicator that guarantees which path it will take. What scientists are watching closely are changes in seismic activity, gas emissions, ground deformation, and the behavior of the lava itself. Any significant shift in these signals could point to a change in the system's stability. For now, Mayon is still active, still evolving, and still capable of producing sudden events. And that means this story is not over yet. Stay informed with clear, real-time insights into events like this. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the headlines. We break down complex situations into what truly matters. Turn on notifications so you never miss critical updates. And join a growing community focused on understanding the world, not just reacting to it.